Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason De La Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We have made it past the halfway point. Some teams do have byes, but for the most part, as you know, we had the major clearage of byes last week. Only 4 games on the schedule here in Texoma, and now we're full bore. Everybody's in district, ready to see who makes the playoffs in this final dash over the final 5 weeks of games. Some people will play every week. A couple still have byes, but it's going to get going in full effect starting this Friday. So we've got a lot to talk about in terms of how some of the districts are already shaping up. We've got some teams in some good spots. We've got some teams with some work to do. And, of course, we'll talk about the districts that are kicking off as well. So what we're going to do is go in order, biggest district to smallest. And for the teams that played last week, we'll talk about them at that point because I think it'd be confusing to kind of go back and forth. So we'll just work our way down from 5A to the 2A level, and we'll talk about the teams that played last week or that were coming off the bye and what they can expect going into district play and their matchups that they have coming up on Friday night. So we will start, as we always do, at the top in District 6 5A Division 1, and the Sherman Bearcats are going on the road to face Frisco Heritage. This is a 7 o'clock start. All of Sherman's games are 7 o'clock start, so keep that in mind. But I will remind you as we go along. There are a couple other districts that have 7 o'clock starts as well, and as always, we point those out to make sure that you know when kickoff is. And they are playing at Kuykendall Stadium. That's formerly Memorial Stadium, as one of the Frisco locations that games are held. And this is 2-3 Sherman, 1-2 in district play after they lost last week 52-9 against Frisco. And Frisco Heritage is sitting at 5-1, 4-0 in district play. They won last week 27-6 against Frisco Lebanon Trail. So just to run down the standings real quick, you have Heritage in a 3-way tie for first place along with Frisco and Frisco Reedy. Sherman is in a 3-way tie for fourth place along with Wakeland and Lone Star. Centennial is sitting at 1-3. Lebanon Trail is now 0-3, and Liberty is in last place at 0-4. So this is a crucial game for both the Bearcats and the Coyotes. They have a lot to play for. I think everybody in this district besides Lebanon Trail and Liberty can consider themselves squarely in the mix. So that's 7 teams fighting for 4 spots. And every week is going to be a key matchup. And I don't know if this might be the key matchup this week. I know there is one other matchup because there are games on Thursday this week as well. Centennial and Lone Star also play on Friday. So that's obviously a key one because you have 2 teams. One's at 1-2 and one's at 1-3. And those are the 2 big ones. Frisco has the bye this week. And Reedy's going to take on Lebanon Trail. So I think this might be the key matchup. If it's not the key matchup, it's the second one as we start to try to figure out the playoff race. Like I said, so Sherman's coming off that loss against Frisco. They fell behind early. It was 21-0. It was 35-3 at halftime. And Sherman struggled to really get anything going. Quick 3 and outs, barely 150 yards of offense, trouble moving the ball against a really good Frisco team. They are 5-1 overall, and like we said, 4-0 in district play. And it wasn't a make or break loss, so that's good. And I think it's one of those games, obviously, that they're going to try to, get over quickly and forget about because it's the first game that Sherman's actually played this year that has not been a close or semi-close game, a game that was in the balance in the second half, let alone the fourth quarter. Obviously fans of the Bearcats know that almost every game has come down to the wire. It's definitely come down to the last possession or two in a lot of cases, and this was a game that was not. Frisco has a really good running game. They run the wing tee. They ran it 58 times for 422 yards. And basically they scored on every possession leading up to the 52 points before they were stopped, and then that came obviously in the fourth quarter with the game out of reach. So both sides of the ball looking at ways to improve. They're facing a Frisco Heritage team that is having one of the best seasons in school history. It's only been around since 2010. They've only had one winning season when they also made the playoffs. That was 2014. So you have a lot of kids right now that are experiencing all of this for the first time. And not to, if you want to look at who they've played in district play, they've beaten Wakeland, they've beaten Frisco Liberty, they've beaten Frisco Centennial. That was a 28-21 score if you want to play the comparison game. And then last week they beat Lebanon Trail. And to play that comparison game, that's almost the exact score that Sherman beat Lebanon Trail a couple weeks ago when they went into their bye. They won their game 28-3. So you have a matchup of teams that played one opponent almost exactly even, and you have another opponent where Sherman lost that game by 7 and Frisco Heritage won that game by 7. So I'm really interested to see the outcome of this game. I feel like not that Frisco Heritage is a paper tiger, but they have played 3 of the bottom teams in the district to start off with. So they've been able to beat the people they're supposed to beat. If you're going to make the playoffs, if you're going to be in the mix, but there is something to say when you've played literally the last the 3 worst teams in the district you've already played. And now they beat Wakeland, and Wakeland was projected to be a playoff team. That was a 19-13 score. That opened district play. I think that opened some people's eyes to what Frisco Heritage was doing. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because I think this could be one of what could end up being a swing game, because Heritage still has to play Frisco. They still have to play Reedy. They could find themselves sliding down the standings here, and Sherman could have a chance to do that. The biggest thing I think is bouncing back from that loss last week. Like we said, a lot of things didn't go well. Can they go in with the right mentality? Because again, if you look at the standings right now, if you're Sherman, and Coach Kane brought this up last week going into the Frisco game, Sherman still controls its destiny, even potentially after this game. If no matter the outcome, there's still people on the schedule they have to beat. Right now they're tied with 2 teams that they still have on the schedule, Wakeland and Lone Star. You're almost certainly going to have to win at least both of those games. And you have a Frisco Liberty team that by the time you play them, they may only have 1 win or no wins. So everything is still in front of you. You had a bad loss. You put it behind you. You focus on Heritage this week. Maybe you get back in the win column. At worst you're still tied for 4th place. Going into the last month of the season, and that's all you can ask for, is to be in a position to control your own destiny. So I think that's the biggest thing with Sherman this week is how are they going to look, coming off a game like that where it got away from them early, and that's something that has not happened. I don't know if it's better to lose like that or to have some of the losses that Sherman has had that have been close, and you just never know until it happens. So we've seen this happen for the first time with Sherman, and how are they gonna bounce back next week? Speaking of bouncing back, we'll move down to District 7 5A Division 2, and the Denison Yellow Jackets will also go on the road this week, and they will go to Terrell for their matchup. They are Denison is 3-2, 1-1 in district play, and Terrell is 1-4, 0-2 in district play. Both teams had byes. This was a district that, despite being 2 weeks into district play, everybody had the bye last week. They set it up. They all agreed. The coaches agreed before when they were making the schedule. Instead of having the roving bye and having having it split, or having the bye before district play, when you only would have played 3 games and then everybody would have had the bye, and then everybody would have played 7 games in a row. Why not do the traditional split 5-5? So everybody, you hate to say like the olden days, but like a normal traditional district, when you would play 5 games, have a bye, and then start your district play. Obviously, districts are bigger now, and everybody agreed to that. Everybody thought, yeah, that makes sense. Why do we want all of us to be ragged, playing 7 games in a row? 4 of us are going to go to the playoffs. Maybe we're going to be a little more beat up than some of these other teams that maybe be in smaller districts, or they have the roving bye. Somebody's going to have a bye later than us and be a little bit fresher. So they put it right in the middle. So everybody played 2 district games. Coming into this week's games after having the bye last week, there's only 2 undefeateds left, Lovejoy and Melissa. As Denison fans know, the last game that Denison played was against Lovejoy, and it did not go well. It went almost exactly like Sherman's lost to Frisco. And so the only difference is that Denison had 2 weeks to sit on that game and rest up on the bye. And so the biggest thing obviously this week is going to be, how does Denison react? They're going on the road again. They opened district on the road with a win at Greenville. And right now there's a 4-way tie for 3rd place. You have Denison, Mesquite Poteet, Crandall, and Greenville, and Princeton and Terrell are both at 0-2. So every game is going to be in the mix for Denison, because they've already played Lovejoy, and they have Melissa coming up here soon. But everybody that they're playing, everybody that either is right behind them or tied with them. If we want to look at their schedule real quick, they're going to play Terrell this week. They're going to play Melissa next week, and then they have Princeton, Crandall, and Poteet to finish. So there's got to be a strong finish at worst. If you want to guarantee the 3rd seed, as long as you beat everybody except Melissa the rest of the way, that would get that done, because you would have the tiebreaker over everybody that you would have beaten with your second loss, and you could finish. You could be 5-2 in this district. And I think that would probably be a good goal. Obviously, we'll know very quickly if they can do better than that and go 6-1 if they can beat Melissa. But obviously, early on, Lovejoy and Melissa have shown to be the top 2 teams. And we'll find out what's going to happen with them after or towards the end of the season, because they finished against each other. So there's a chance that Lovejoy and Melissa, are both undefeated going through everybody, going into that final game where the winner gets the district championship and the loser gets second place. But that's obviously a lot of stuff down the road. Right now you have a Terrell team that has not made the playoffs or had a winning record since 2016. They're not off to a good start right now. If you look at the losses, though, they only lost by 3 points to Hallsville. That was a shootout, 44-41. So they have been competitive against people. They lost to Kaufman, 24-21. So that could easily have been a win. But you look in district, they opened with Lovejoy. That score is similar to Denison's loss, 51-7. They lost 59-7. And then they lost to Terrell. Terrell lost to Melissa, 56-21. So they've already got Melissa and Lovejoy out of the way, and I'm sure their coaches are saying, "Hey, we're going to shoot for 3rd. If we win out, that's the best we can do. So that's what we're going to try to do." I'm sure they know Denison's a team that's in the mix to try to stop them, and obviously you don't want to drop to 0-3 and really have to fight your way back. I will note about Terrell, they run an offense very similar to Kennedale. That's why Coach Whitson put Kennedale on the schedule. They wanted to see a wing T offense. This could be one of those games like that goes very fast because both teams will want to run. And like we said, the biggest thing with Denison is can they bounce back? Can they come off the bye attacking this game the way that they should? You hope they're not looking at the record. I'm sure they're not. But you don't want to think, oh, this team's 1-4, 0-2, we can beat them. You had a close win against Greenville, and that was a good start. And then obviously the Lovejoy game last time out did not go anywhere near what you thought it would go. But like we said with Sherman, it's right there. You beat the people coming up on your schedule, and you have a really good shot to make the playoffs. And I think it's going to be one of these districts where it may go down to the last week, like we mentioned, not just with Melissa Lovejoy, but Greenville Terrell is the last week of the season. Mesquite Poteet and Denison is the last week of the season. I mean, that right there is 3 games that I think are going to fully impact the maybe not the playoffs, but also seeding for sure. So this is a district I think that has a chance to be highly competitive all the way through, and there may be some tiebreaker scenarios. So you want to bank that stuff as soon as possible. And Denison has a chance to do that in a big way when they go to Terrell on Friday night in District 7-5A Division II action. Next one on the list, Van Alstyne in District 5-4A Division II will be hosting Aubrey. And this is the biggest game in 5-4A Division II because we have the last 2 undefeated teams in the district facing off. The winner will get sole possession of first and obviously has the inside track not just to the district championship, but also for the top seed for the playoffs, which is always key. These two, off to the 2-0 starts. Aubrey is 4-2. They won last week 63-6 against Gainesville, and Van Alstyne improved to 3-3. They won 52-35 against Sanger, and that was a close game against Sanger for a little bit. Van Alstyne was able to pull away the last 4 minutes in that game. Almost exclusively a running game for the Panthers. 61 carries for 346 yards, led by Jaden Mahan. 32 carries, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns. Dakota Howard, 10 carries, 74 yards, 2 touchdowns. Weston Johnston, 11 carries, 54 yards, 2 touchdowns. And the big plays late. Jackson Allen intercepted a pass and returned it 70 yards for a touchdown when Sanger was attempting to drive and potentially take the lead because Van Alstyne was up 30. I think it was 39-35. And then Van Alstyne forced a fumble. Once Sanger got the ball back again, they turned that into a touchdown. So 52-35 is the final. And Van Alstyne's 2-0. At the worst, the loser of this game is still in a really good spot to make the playoffs. Gainesville, Bridgeport, both 1-1, and Farmersville, Crum, and Sanger are 0-2. And so again, when you look at the standings in this district, it's a 7-team district, and so you got to beat 3 people, and they've both beaten 2 people. So essentially, you take care of business against one more team, and you're probably pretty safe. In the case of in the case of Van Alstyne beating Sanger and then beating Crum, essentially all you would have to do at this point would probably beat Farmersville just based on the standings, and that would get you in. But you're in a good place to really pump up your seeding with the winner of this one. They've known each other for a while. They've been in the district the last couple of years. Aubrey's won 4 of the last 5. They won last year. It wasn't very close. Aubrey went to the region final last year, also known as the state quarterfinals, where they lost to Salina. They lost to Anna as one of their losses. I don't know if we talked about that we talked about that one because Anna played Van Alstyne the next week, and their game against Anna came down to the wire. Van Alstyne's didn't, and also Aubrey started. If I can find their game, they beat Sunnyvale to start, and then they lost to Anna, and then where's that second loss? I can't find it. They lost to Arlington Seguin, which I think was a little bit of a shocker. They lost to them 29-14. So that was one of those that, like I said, that caught some people's eye. I think Aubrey went into this district as the favorite, and they've gotten off to a good start. So if Van Alstyne's able to come away with a win here, like I said, they've got the inside track. At that point, depending on what happens, just looking at some of the matchups that are this week in the district, Bridgeport has the bye, Farmersville and Gainesville play, and Sanger and Crum play. So that's a big one down at the bottom. If you want to stay in the race, there's a chance Sanger could be 0-3. If you're Van Alstyne and if whoever wins this game has a really good chance to clinch a playoff spot the next week. And then at that point you're just chasing seeding. So and Van Alstyne plays Farmersville next week. So like I said, it's early, but things are starting to take shape. The middle, you've got teams in the middle that and of course this is a district where somebody has a bye every week, so that's annoying in trying to track down who can clinch playoff spots because people have odd number of games. But Sanger's obviously fallen to the bottom at 0-2. If they drop to 0-3, then I don't know if you can really keep them in the race anymore. But if you're Van Alstyne, you're in a good spot going into this game against Aubrey, and it's a good measure of where you might stand against one of the better teams in the region, and kind of go from there. So going to be interesting to see as Van Alstyne hosts Aubrey on Friday night. We'll move down to District 4-3A Division 1, and we will talk about another team that played last week, and that's the Whitesboro Bearcats. They are 5-0 overall and 2-0 in district play after they beat Boyd 43-8 in a game that was close at halftime, 22-8. Boyd actually led the game 8-7 before early in the second quarter before Whitesboro shut them down the rest of the way. Barely finished with barely short of 200 yards for the game, and for Boyd, couple interceptions by the Bearcats, and then kind of methodically broke the game open to get to that 43-8 score. Again, we've said this almost every week with Whitesboro. Pretty balanced. They almost got to 600 yards. They were at 599, so it came up just short of that. But they had 365 yards rushing, 234 yards passing. And we talk about Grayson Ledbetter leading the way on the ground, 26 carries, 247 yards, 2 touchdowns. Mac Harper was 12 of 19 passing for the 234. He had 2 touchdown passes, also ran for 2 touchdowns. The 2 touchdown passes were to Clay Hermes. He had just the 2 catches, but they were both for TDs. And they covered 58 yards. Carter Sluter, 2 catches for 87 yards. Jay Sanders, 6 for 63. And that pretty much covered all the touchdowns. You had 2x3 guys each, and that got the job done. And so they're 5-0, first time since 2007. That also was the last time that Whitesboro went 6-0. So they're trying to match that as the best start in school history. But obviously the biggest thing is 2-0 in district play. And right now you have 3 teams at 2-0, Whitesboro, Paradise, and Brock. And then you have Peaster and Ponder at 0-1, and then you have Boyd and Pilot Point at 0-2. So, in some wacky, weird thing, because of teams have byes, the top 3 teams have all the wins in this district. So that's kind of weird. And there's a chance that could continue in this matchup because Whitesboro is going to be hosting Peaster. Peaster, like I mentioned, 0-1 in district play. They lost last week 49-14 against Brock. They had the bye to open district play. So they're 2-3 overall, and then the 0-1. They've met obviously the last 2 years in district play. The games have not been close. Last year Whitesboro won 52-9. And I think Peaster is probably on the same level. They've got a lot of the same guys. But I don't know if this is a good matchup for them as they try to bounce back. They got the part of the short end of the stick here by starting with the bye and then having to play Brock, who obviously we all know how good Brock is, and then having to play Whitesboro, who if they're not on the same level as Brock right now, they're pretty close behind. Obviously, they're undefeated. And then they have to play Paradise next. So they're playing the 3 teams that are at the top of the heap in a row to start their district play. And so that's either good or bad, because if they get a win, they're in a good spot, but they could find themselves in an 0-3 hole real quick. The good thing about that is they finish with 3 teams that they might look at as long as we beat those 3 teams, then we make the playoffs. But it's a tough road for Peaster. Obviously, Whitesboro's been having a really good year. I think the only thing with them is if you worry about this as a trap game, it's at home. It's a team that you beat last year. Like we said 52-9. It was not close. And who do they have next week? They go to Brock in what is probably going to be the first big showdown. Paradise is playing Boyd on this week. I assume Paradise is going to win, and Brock has the bye this week. So if you're on the Whitesboro side, you're thinking don't overlook Peaster, Brock, because Brock's going to be rested, and you're going to Brock next week. You lost to him twice last year. The one being in the region final to end the best year in school history. Don't get caught looking ahead at a game that everyone's gonna be looking at next week. Don't go in off a loss and what some people might consider a bad loss. Try to stay focused on this week. I'm sure a lot of people will be talking about Brock Whitesboro next week. Keep that next week. Do not get caught looking ahead. And if they don't, then Whitesboro should be 6-0 going into that matchup. And we mentioned that's the start of what could determine the top 3 seeds, because Whitesboro plays Brock, and then Brock plays Paradise, and then Whitesboro plays Paradise in the second to last week of the season. So we'll know every week coming up that there's a big game for the top to see who's in the running for the district championship, and then honestly probably who is what the order is probably going to be for the top 3 seeds. Nobody else has a winning record in overall except for Ponder, and Ponder is 0-1. They had the bye this last week, but they opened district play with a loss to Paradise. So gonna be interesting to see if Ponder can get in the mix as the only team with a winning record. But I think that's where Whitesboro is. I think they should be confident. They should be ready, as long as they're not looking ahead. You've got a chance to be 6-0, 3-0, and then depending on how things go, you've got a chance to wrap up that playoff spot. Depending on how things are going, because you've already got some wins over some people at the bottom. You've already beaten Pot Point. You've already beaten Boyd. If you beat Peaster, depending on what happens that next week, you might be able to clinch a playoff spot and at least lock that up, get that out of the way as well for the Bearcats as they host Peaster on Friday night. And the last game that we will talk about from Week 6 is up next, because we will go to District 5-3A, Division 1, and that's the Pottsboro Cardinals going to visit the Bonham Warriors. Pottsboro is 4-1 and 1-0 after they won their district opener 48-19 against Mineola, and Bonham is 2-4 and 0-2. Bonham played last week Bonham's played the first 2 weeks. They lost last week 68-12 against Mount Vernon, who obviously is state ranked and is expected to be in the mix for the district championship. So that's not much of a surprise there. I think the outcome of Pottsboro Mineola may not have been surprising. I think the way in which the Cardinals did it opened some eyes, especially in East Texas. We talked last week. How was this matchup going to go? You had a Mineola team. They've got a kid on the roster, Dawson Pendergrass, who's committed to Baylor. They played Mount Vernon tough for a half. They were only down 6 points to Mount Vernon at halftime. And what did that mean for this matchup? And Pottsboro comes out right away, scores 3 touchdowns in the first quarter, scores 3 touchdowns in the second quarter. They were up 42-7 at halftime, and they cruise from there. And I think the lopsided nature of this game, and again, not only the lopsided nature, but Pottsboro went the final quarter and a half without scoring. They had the 48 points by the middle of the third quarter. That was the shocking nature of it. And leading the way was Major McBride. He had 20 carries for 189 yards and 6 touchdowns. It looked like a very fun matchup between him and Pendergrass. Pendergrass had 27 carries for 237 yards, but only 2 touchdowns. So obviously the touchdowns are the big difference, and obviously that's how you beat people. So McBride had a huge game. Halen Flanagan, 17 carries, 91 yards, and a touchdown, and that was it for Pottsboro touchdowns. They only threw 2 passes. Flanagan completed both of them. One of them was to McBride for 24 yards, but Pottsboro goes 2 for 2, 35 yards. They run it 50 times, 325 yards, and Mineola's almost exactly the same. They ran it 47 times for 296. They threw it 9 times for 9 yards. They ended up getting 9 yards, 3 of 9 for 9 yards. Had 2 interceptions, and it was, I think that the way this game played out has caught some eyes. And now if you're Pottsboro, because you had the bye, you're quote unquote a game behind in terms of the standings or whatever. But there's only 3 unbeaten teams now: Mount Vernon 6-0 and 2-0, Winsboro 5-0 and 2-0, and of course Pottsboro sitting here with the 1-0 start. Commerce is 1-1. Rains is 0-1, and Bonham and Mineola are both 0-2. And again, I think we're in the same sort of boat. If you're Pottsboro, you're coming off this win. You're going to Bonham. Mount Vernon and Winsboro is also being played this week, so that's an early indicator right there. Somebody's going to lose. So if you're Pottsboro and you take care of business, it's you and the Mount Vernon Winsboro winner as the undefeated teams left in the standings. And who comes to town next week to play Pottsboro? Winsboro. So don't get caught looking ahead. You're taking on a program in Bonham that has gotten better the last couple of years. Made the playoffs last year. They're trying to get to consecutive playoff appearances for the first time since 2012, 2013. But if you're Pottsboro, you've won 7 of the last 8 games. Last year you won 58-37, which shootout, but you still won by 3 scores. And so don't get caught looking ahead. Don't pay attention to the fact that Winsboro is the big game for you next week. Focus on Bonham. They've got a running back in Jaron Ross who's really good. And he's had some big games against some people. Don't get caught up in that. And just do what you need to do to get to 2-0. And I think that might be the biggest thing for Pottsboro. And their only loss, we've said it so far this season. They lost to Whitesboro in a game that came down to the wire, that they had a chance to win. And so they could easily be 5-0. They've obviously shown they can score. They've been in the 50s a couple times. This one they almost got to 50. So I think the big thing is the defense is playing well. And they may not need it this week. They may need it next week. But going to Bonham, I think you can, like I said, you can put them in Bonham in a bad spot at 0-3. And put some pressure on them. And you could put yourself in a good spot as you try to compete for a district championship, which they're obviously thinking they can do. So Pottsboro's going to Bonham in 5-3A Division I action this week. So everybody else on the list, as we go over these games, did not play last week. They had the bye. So as we get into the 3A Division II schools and the 2A schools, everybody had the bye last week. And the first game that we'll start with is SNS hosting Callisburg in the 6-3A Division II opener. SNS comes in at 1-4. Callisburg comes in at 2-3. The issues for SNS we have seen, they've had some trouble with consistency. Their one win is against Whitewright, but they have had trouble on both sides of the ball in terms of stopping people. The last game out, they lost to Howe 68-14. Weren't able to build on that win against Whitewright that we saw the week before that. And I think I think the bye week may have come at a good time for Callisburg. Looking at this district, you have Holiday, who's 5-0 in state ranked. Everybody knows about Holiday, especially around here because they faced Gunner so many times deep in the playoffs. Henrietta is the only other team with a winning record, and they got killed their last game. They had a chance to enter district play undefeated, and they got beat badly by Jacksboro, 41-0. So they went into their bye kind of smarting a little bit. But then you have Callisburg and Valley View are both 2-3, and City View got their first win last week in a big way, so they're 1-3. And I was just looking at this district and these teams. Obviously, I think Holiday is obviously the cream of the crop. Odds on district favorite. After that, I don't really know. I think Henrietta might be a teensy bit vulnerable, but I think they're obviously, you can kind of pencil them in as a playoff team. But the other two playoff spots in this district, I really think could be up for grabs. I think Callisburg would be a favorite to get one of them. This is a team last year that went 9-2, had a really good season, continuing to build some things under head coach Eddie Gill, and I think they're good enough to potentially beat the other three teams in this district and maybe find a way to beat Henrietta to get second place. They've got kids that know how to win. They've got kids that know how to make the playoffs. Valley View, we mentioned earlier when they played Tioga the week before, they had broken a long losing streak dating back to last season. So they're playing better. I think City View is maybe taking a step back from what we were used to the last time we saw some of these teams in that same district. So I think it's kind of a free for all. And I think at worst, if you're SNS, the worst case scenario would probably be beat Valley View, beat City View, and get the fourth seed. I think that could be doable. And so I think at worst that's what you're looking at. But Callisburg's going to be an interesting test right off the bat. They've had some close games. They barely beat Lindsay. Lindsay's not having a very good season, so that's sort of an interesting score that stands out. But one of their losses is to Bells. Bells is state ranked. They've played Bonham. We're talking about Bonham. They played Bonham a couple weeks ago, and they beat them badly, 68-26. So I think maybe with Callisburg, I think we could say, the biggest thing with them is consistency. They haven't shown a lot. They played Pottsboro. We can throw that out there too. That was a 55-36 Pottsboro win. So I think that might be the biggest thing with Callisburg. And then with SNS, like we mentioned, can they get enough offensive performance or offensive production and bring back some of the defensive issues? Rein in some of those problems that have seen them give up, 68 points to Howe, 49 points to Collinsville, 48 points to Tioga. Now, if you're looking at that, you could say, well, those are probably three playoff teams, and teams that are going to be near the top of their district. So I think when you look at SNS's schedule right now, they've played 5 games, and I think 4 of them are against playoff teams. So it's one of those deals where you just kind of maybe still finding your way. Maybe the bye week came at the right time. But it's an interesting start, and I mention it too because not that we want them looking ahead, but we can look ahead because that's my job. It's what fans do. Callisburg and SNS play this week, and then SNS goes to Valley View next week. So that's 2 games right off the bat against 2 of the teams that are probably you think you're directly competing against, because then you have Holiday and Henrietta, but then you finish with City View. So if you can bank some wins, that City View SNS game to end the regular season, that might be the winner gets in and the loser goes home. But you want to put yourself in position to where that definitely means something for you, and that may mean having to take care of business here at the start of the schedule by hosting Callisburg on Friday night. The big game, the number one game that maybe not just in Texoma, but in the state, especially in 3A, maybe just in 3A Division 2, but this is a big one. Gunner at Bells, 4-0 Gunner, Bells at 4-1, both teams ranked in the top 5 in the state for Division 2. Gunner is number 1, Bells is number 4. I will point out that Holiday is number 2, so they're in that mix there as well. But this is the one to watch because the last couple years, everybody that knows about District 8-3A Division 2, you know Gunner and Bells has decided the district championship. Bells has only lost to Gunner. Gunner is riding a 40-game district winning streak that goes all the way back to 2015. Last year when they played, Gunner won 41-14. And so the biggest thing is when you have matchups like this, can the underdog find a way to pull it off? I think everybody looks at Bells going in as the underdog. Bells is playing well. Their only loss, like we mentioned with Pottsboro, was to Whitesboro in a close game, in a game that we could easily have 5-0 versus 4-0 in this matchup. But we sit here and we say how many games in a row has Gunner won against Bells? 14. So if that's the case, you got to find a way to win this game if you're Bells and you're doing it from a disadvantage because of the history and because of the recency. And you have a Gunner team obviously that is looking to keep that streak alive. But again, I think you have the two best teams in the district playing in this game. I think you have two of the best teams in the state in 3A Division 2 playing in this game. So if you told me it was going to be a great game, I would believe it. If it's not, I don't know. I don't know if Bells can win a lopsided game. I think they're more of a grinded. This needs to be more of a grinded game with the way that they run their offense with the slot T. I am interested to see what Gunner does only because, and we've talked about this with their schedule, the only tough game that they've played so far is Brock. The game against Gladewater to go into their bye again was like the previous the two games they started with, not very close. So I'm interested to see. I want to see how much of a resistance Bells can put. Are they more towards that Brock game or are they more towards some of those other games? But it's a fascinating matchup. I don't say the best part is if they do end up on opposite sides of the bracket, we were so close last year. We were an overtime away from having Bells and Gunner play for the region championship. And so I know that would be an awesome game to have a rematch that deep in the playoffs. And so I'm interested to see what this matchup does this time around, and then maybe we could see this 8 or 9 weeks down the road in a game around here for the ultimate title of region, for winning the region. But this is obviously everyone's going to be looking at this game from around the state. I don't know, not to belittle the rest of the district, but this may be one of those deals where if you're looking at it from the outside, depending on what the score is, is Gunner's winning streak gonna carry to 45 wins in a row by the end of the regular or district games by the end of the regular season. So, but this is the big one, not just in here, not just in our area, but from a statewide focus. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be watching that game because it is number 1 versus number 4, and to see how Bells can measure up. It's at their place. You never know. But I think that's obviously the eye catcher of the week. And the other game in this district is also one that I think a lot of people are going to be interested in. Leonard's going to Howe. The Bulldogs have the home field. They're both 4-1. They haven't played recently. The last time they played was 2015. But you have two teams here that are saying, hey, don't forget about us. We have the possibility of being in the mix as well. We're both 4-1, and we think don't overlook us. And obviously we've talked about how every week, they're having a really good season. I don't know if you want to call it a great season yet. Compared to the last couple of years, obviously it is a great season. When you have those back-to-back 0-10 seasons, when you go through district and you go 0-7, 0-7, so you have a Howe team trying to break a 15-game district losing streak that goes back to the last game of 2019. You're talking about, if they get this win, the worst they can do is 5-5. That would mean they won't have a losing season for the first time in 6 years. 2016 was the last time they didn't have a losing season. So you have that aspect of how drop down. They are doing what we thought they could do with the schedule they have. They've had some good wins. They've had some lopsided wins. They're showing they can put up points. And so I think at this point now, if you're Howe, you're thinking, well, we're going to make the playoffs. We've shown we can win. They have wins over teams that made the playoffs last year. They have wins over teams that are probably going to make the playoffs again this year. And confidence is, if it's not at an all-time high for those kids over there, it's definitely close. And you have a Leonard program, even with a coaching change. They're trying to make the playoffs for the 11th time in 12 seasons. They know what it's like to make the playoffs. They're always usually a good program, and I think at least in the early, after 1 week of district play, we can definitely say the winner of this game at worst has the inside track to third place, and then the winner of this game is going to sit there and say, "Hey Bells, what do you got? Hey Gunner, what do you got?" Because they're going to be in that position to make a move. And just looking ahead, again, if you're Howe, you've got Leonard this week, you've got Gunner next week, and then you have Bells the next week. So if you're challenging the throne, if you're going to make your presence known in this district, it's going to happen the first 3 weeks. And the big thing for that might be, hey, don't let those games get you down if they don't go your way, because you got games at the end that you're going to have to win to get into the playoffs. So, but you're going to know right off the bat with Howe where they stand. And we could say, Leonard's got the opposite. They'll play Howe this week, and then they'll play Lone Oak and Blue Ridge, and then they've got the big two at the end. So if you're Leonard, you don't want to be going into Gunner and Bells at the end, having to win both of them to get in, or going into the last week knowing we have to beat Bells, who might be their only loss to Gunner at that point. So this is a huge game for both of them for a lot of different reasons, and it's going to be really interesting to see what the outcome is and how close the score is, because you'll have other people in this district saying, okay, well, if that's the outcome, what does that mean for us? And because Gunner and Bells are playing each other, and because Leonard and Howe are playing each other, that means that Blue Ridge and Lone Oak are playing each other, and so that guarantees a positive start for the winner there. I'm going to guess Blue Ridge is the team that'll come out with the win there, just based on looking at records and how seasons have gone so far. Lone Oak is sitting at 0-5. They give up a ton of points. They haven't scored a lot of points. But like I said, you look at the standings just going into this district. Gunner's 4-0. Obviously, they had the one game canceled, so they didn't play a full 5 games. But Howe, Bells, and Leonard are both 4-1, and Blue Ridge is 3-2. So it's gonna be a really interesting battle, because I think Blue Ridge is gonna beat Lone Oak, and they're gonna be sitting at 1-0, and then they're gonna be in that mix as well. So maybe for the 4th spot. So it's gonna be really fun in this district, because I think I think every week there's a good matchup that you can sit here and say, well, how is this going to affect everything? And then, of course, the big question is, can somebody knock off Gunner? We're gonna get two challengers right off the top with Bells, and then Howe next week to get in that mix. But I think District A3A Division 2 is gonna be really fun. With and like I said, it may be the undercard because Gunner's Bells is so huge on a statewide schedule, but Leonard at Howe is a pretty stinking good game to check out this week as well. So that's gonna be interesting. To see what happens there. Last couple games as we wrap it up. We're going down to 2A. 6-2A Division 1 kicks off this week as well. And we have an all-local matchup to start with there as Tom Bean will host Tioga. We have Tioga is 3-2, Tom Bean 2-3. Both coming off their byes, as we mentioned. And we did talk last week about what is Tom Bean going to look like going forward, knowing that it can't make the playoffs. I'm assuming that they're talking about being a spoiler. They're assuming about showing, hey, this is how good we could have been, whether it's first place, fourth place, whatever. We want to make it look like we know how good we could have been if not for that UIL ruling coming down and taking away the playoffs this year and next year. Tioga, you have a team that made the playoffs last year, had a huge jump up last year to get into the playoffs. We've talked about with some of the teams having the bye when they are having the bye. I know Tioga's been banged up. They've had some guys sidelined for multiple games. It seems like when one guy comes in, another guy goes out. So I think the bye came at a perfect time for them to gear up for this district. And again, this is another district where you look at what teams have done in non-district, and I know it's different opponents and records or whatever. But you have a 5-0 Nakona team, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But then you have Tioga, Trenton, and Alvord, three teams that are holdovers from this district last year, are all 3-2. And then White and Tom Bean are 2-3. So there's no team that's 0-5. There's no team that just looks like, okay, that's the one everyone's going to beat. This has a chance to be another, really competitive district. And I'm interested to see what happens here. And like I said, I think we can say with Tom Bean, we just don't know what's going to happen. And the bad thing is that even if they beat people, it may not make a difference because the next team's going to move up in the slot. So, but obviously having an all local matchup to kick off district play is interesting. This was they were district opponents last year, the last couple of years. Tioga won last year 70-0. We've talked about how Tom Bean has improved tremendously over last year. On both sides of the ball. I wouldn't expect that to happen, that type of a lopsided score again. But obviously, if you're Tioga, you're looking at it as, hey, we beat this team last year. We should beat them again this year. If we're going to be a playoff team, and not just be a playoff team, are we going to be in the mix for the district title, which I'm assuming was a goal after finishing where they finished last year. The question obviously is going to be, are the guys that need to be healthy? And if they're not, how soon can they be based on the schedule coming up? And in that regard, we can go to White in this district as well. They're hosting Nakona. Again, the bye was much needed for the Tigers. A lot of guys banged up, a lot of guys sidelined. You saw it. We've talked about it the last couple weeks. Who was going to play, who wasn't going to play going into the bye week because do you want guys as close to 100% for the games that actually count in the standings? White got off to the good start. They won their first two. Then the injuries started biting, and then they lost their last three. They lost to SNS by a touchdown, or by 6 points by a touchdown. They got Blue Ridge beat them pretty bad, and then What was the third one? Oh, and they started that run with Honey Grove. So, two of the games, they had 0 points and 6 points. Just because, like I said, the guys missing on offense, it was not what the offense looked like the first 2 weeks. They beat a Celeste team that we're going to talk about here in a second. And they shut out Clarksville. And things were looking good. So, I don't know. Again, this is two teams that dropped down from 3A last year. Where it was a playoff team last year. So, it's going to be interesting. I don't know. I haven't really dug into the Nakona-ness of the schedule. To see how they've done what they've done. I mean, I'm looking at the teams that they've beaten. They beat Era. They beat Quanah. They beat Chico. I'm not gonna lie. They beat Valley View by 3 going into the bye week. Just looking at some of those teams and what they've done recently, that's not exactly a murderer's row. They beat Electra. So I don't know how. Like I said, we talk about Paper Tigers. I don't know how good that 5-0 is. Obviously, Alvord and Trenton are playoff teams of recent vintage. Alvord was in the mix for the district championship last year. Lindsay's gone. We'll talk about them here in a second. So you have some teams that were playoff teams last year. Collinsville was in the mix till the last week, and they dropped out of this district. So it's a whole new group. It's gonna be, like I said, it's gonna be interesting to see how good is that 5-0 for Nakona, and if it's good, there's a chance, I think maybe them against Alvord might be for the district championship. I think Tioga might have something to say about that as well. But this is gonna be an interesting one. Obviously, if White still is missing some guys, again, this might be one of those. If you get past this one, you might just have to worry about the other ones. Because again, in this district, if you beat 2 people, you're in the mix, and if you beat 3 people, you're probably going to the playoffs. It's just a question of beating the right 3 people. But White obviously may have drawn the short straw by starting with the 5-0 team and not somebody around them record-wise. But so that's going to be sort of an interesting, and it's a home game, so there's always that. That's not a fun drive from Nakona to get to White. So maybe that plays into it. And again, you're talking about a Nakona team. Not only did they drop down, they've got their most wins already since 2017. So again, you have a group of kids. They dropped down. They thought, hey, this could be good for us. Much like how we're at a level we can compete at, and they haven't had this taste of success. Obviously because all the kids have cycled through. So nobody on the team has had the success like they're having right now. Is that something that Nakona has to worry about, because all of this stuff is brand new for them. So that's going to be interesting to see the results of that one. And the last game on the list, Collinsville is hosting Celeste in District 8 2A Division 2 action. Collinsville is 4-1 and 1-0. They did not play last week. They had the bye. This is a floating bye district. But Celeste did play last week, and they are 5-1 and 2-0. They won against Lindsay 32-21. And so, like we mentioned, so Celeste is sitting here at 5-1. Their only losses to White. They found a way to beat some other people. They beat Trenton in overtime. They've had some other close games. They beat Wolf City. They lost. They beat Quinlan Bowles by a couple scores. They've had some close games. They opened with a district with a 43-8 win over Chico before beating Lindsay last week. And we know if we want to play a comparison game, Collinsville's only district game so far was their 26-0 win over Lindsay before they had the bye last week. So if you're looking at the district standings in this one, there's 3 teams that are undefeated in district play so far. Celeste is the only one at 2-0. Both Collinsville and Santo are 1-0. Santo beat Munster last week. We talked about that as the number one game to watch, and that was a game that I think Munster led 17-0, and they lost 21-17. So Santo, like I said, they've been state ranked. They are 5-0. They've outscored their opponents 151-31. So they've obviously earned their accolades. But like I said, you have Celeste at 5-1, Collinsville sitting here at 4-1. Then you have Munster and Chico are both 1-1, 2-4 overall, and Era and Lindsay are both 0-2. And Lindsay has yet to win a game. Era is 1-5. So again, if you want to look at this 7-team district right now, you have Era and Lindsay bringing up the rear, don't have a win. Is this a 4-team? Is this 5 teams fighting for 4 spots? And obviously the winner of this game stays in a tie with Santo for first place. Santo had the bye last week. Munster has the bye this week. Santo is going to Chico. That should be a win. The Era is at Lindsay. So one of those teams is going to be 0-3. The other one's going to be 1-2. And so if you're Collinsville, you've been playing well. Your loss was to Cooper. And that was a 12-point game. But then, like I said, you bounced back in that district opener, so that was good to see. And the question is, who between these two is going to be in the running with Santo for the district title? The winner's going to stay in that seat. Celeste has the bye next week, so they're looking to go into that, potentially 3-0, and in a really good spot. Collinsville's at home. Their offense has been explosive at times. They've been putting up some big numbers. A lot of it's been through the passing game. Celeste always has athletes. I saw them against Tioga again in the playoffs last year. They've got several of those guys are back. So this could be a shootout. I don't think this is going to be a defensive struggle at all. So but again, we've got a lot of games right off the bat in these young districts. They could be, you don't know now. But when we look back in 2 or 3 weeks or at the end of the season, you say that was a huge matchup, but that was a huge outcome that changed, first and second and third, maybe a playoff spot was decided in that game. So a lot of fun games this week in week 7. Like we said, we should have pretty much a full slate. There are a couple teams that are going to be having buys along the way, but it's go time. We're rocking and rolling with games every week that mean everything. And give it another week or two, and we'll be able to start talking about this team can clinch playoffs. We'll see how many of our teams can get in. I think it's pretty obvious that we're going to have more than a handful just based on how some teams have looked so far. And this is the first week for a lot of them to take that step towards the playoffs. So it's gonna be really fun the rest of the way. I hope everybody enjoys the games this week. I appreciate you listening. Again, you can always follow me on Twitter at Jason De La Rosa, HeraldDemocrat.com when you're looking for preview stuff during the week. Friday night and Saturday, get the recap, see the standings, see the scores, see everything that's going on. Check out all that stuff. We put all the stuff on our social media on Facebook, on the Herald Democrat page, and on the All-Texomaland page. So check out all that stuff. I don't know if I mention that every week, but definitely want to put that out there to give you guys other options to follow along as well. So enjoy the games. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.